You probably think of the ocean as a wild expanse of animals trapped in a predictable loop. A predator sees food, it hunts, it senses danger, it flees. We assume wild creatures operate strictly on a factory-installed software program called instinct. Because of that, humans feel entirely safe sailing massive luxury boats across the globe, assuming the giant creatures beneath our hulls will simply ignore us. Except right now, that assumption is being completely torn to pieces. In the narrow, high-traffic shipping lanes of the Strait of Gibraltar, an entire population of apex predators has broken the biological script. They aren't hunting for food. They are conducting organized, multi-step tactical operations against human property. They are studying human ships, tracking their vulnerabilities, and systematically sinking them. You think animal behavior is fixed in stone. But down in the dark, a localized underwater culture has quietly shifted. An entire pod of apex killers has learned a new strategy, and they are passing the playbook down to their children. For a long time, humanity held a remarkably comforting view of the ocean's apex predator, the killer whale, or orca. Despite their terrifying name, decades of marine data told us a reassuring story. In the wild, orcas did not view humans as food. If a human diver swam next to a 6-ton wild orca, the whale would usually look at them with mild curiosity and glide away. For over a century of recorded maritime history, there was not a single documented case of a wild orca killing a human being in the wild. We looked at this peaceful record and built a flattering myth. We assumed orcas had an instinctual, almost spiritual respect for humanity. We told ourselves that because we were the dominant species on land, the ocean's top predator naturally accepted our presence. When ancient mariners told terrifying folktales of sea monsters attacking ships, modern scientists dismissed them as superstitious exaggerations. The old story was rigid. Wild animals do not coordinate political statements. They do not hold grudges across generations. If an animal bumps into a boat, it's a clumsy accident, a territorial mistake, or a playful juvenile being curious. Humans assumed that we were the only creatures on Earth capable of launching a coordinated, purposeful campaign against another species' technology. It was a theory that made us feel completely in control of the waves. It also turned out to be dangerously naive. The comforting lie completely dissolved in May of 2020. A group of sailors navigating a luxury sailing yacht off the coast of Spain suddenly felt a massive, violent shock shake their hull. The steering wheel violently ripped out of the captain's hands, breaking his fingers. When they looked over the edge into the dark water, they didn't see an underwater reef or a floating log. They saw a highly organized pack of 9-meter-long apex killers. The whales weren't biting at random. They were executing a precise, coordinated physical maneuver. 2 younger whales were acting as lookouts, while 2 massive adults focused entirely on slamming their heavy heads into the boat's rudder, snapping the fiberglass and steel steering mechanism completely in half. Within months, this wasn't an isolated incident. It became an epidemic. Dozens of captains began reporting identical, highly specific attacks across the Iberian coast. The whales were hunting in silence, ignoring the humans on deck, and completely destroying the ship's steering systems, leaving multi-million-dollar vessels drifting helplessly in the dark. At least 4 yachts were completely sunk to the bottom of the sea. When marine biologists rushed to map the data, they discovered something chilling. This wasn't a random surge of animal madness, it was a learned social trend. And it all tracked back to the psychological trauma of a single matriarch whale. How does a wild animal actually coach an organized rebellion against human engineering? It runs on a high-stakes combination of social transmission, trauma processing, and targeted mechanical exploitation. First, let's look at the origin of the glitch. A dominant adult female orca researchers named White Gladys. Biologists analyzing the strike patterns realized that White Gladys had likely suffered a near-fatal interaction with human technology. She had either been struck by a high-speed commercial vessel or became brutally entangled in illegal longline fishing gear. In the animal kingdom, trauma usually causes a creature to flee an area forever. But orcas possess a highly advanced, dense neurological architecture, featuring an expanded paralimbic system designed specifically to process deep emotional states and social bonding. White Gladys didn't run. She processed her trauma by shifting her behavioral algorithm. She began aggressively attacking the rudders of passing boats, the exact piece of human machinery that likely injured her. But here is where the mechanism transitions from an individual grudge into a systemic societal threat. Orcas do not operate on raw instinct, they operate on culture. They are one of the few non-human species on Earth that pass down complex, non-genetic behaviors through observational learning. They have distinct dialects, regional hunting strategies, and localized social trends that they teach to their offspring. When the younger whales in White Gladys's pod watched their dominant matriarch attack a boat hull, they didn't see an act of defense. They saw a high-value social trend. Scientists reviewing underwater footage noticed an escalating, multi-step learning process. White Gladys would initiate the strike, positioning her massive bulk to show the exact angle needed to break the rudder. The juvenile whales would hover close by, carefully watching her form. Then, the juveniles would step in, mimicking her movements, taking turns slamming their heads into the fiberglass until the steel bent. They turned a survival mechanism into a taught cultural practice, and the playbook is spreading. Iberian orcas are now traveling to adjacent pods, demonstrating the strategy to entirely different family lines. A behavioral virus has been released into the marine population. The whales have successfully analyzed a critical flaw in human maritime design. They realize that a boat without a rudder is a dead object. They don't need to pierce the thick, armored hull of a ship to conquer it. They just have to take out the steering.